Welcome back to Call the Nurse. Today's episode is a little different. It's just me, just Mindie, just me sitting here with a full heart, a few tears, and a duck named Gigi, and all the lessons that she's taught me. And not just about animals, but about motherhood and fear and letting go and letting myself grow too. You see, when Gigi, this duck, first came into our lives a few months ago, I thought I was just rescuing her. And in many ways, I was. But somewhere along the way, she began rescuing me too. This isn't the first time I have raised a duck. Last year, I found a baby duckling in my pool and took her in just to make sure she was safe and not drown. And I ended up keeping her for several months until she eventually grew up and flew away. Her name was Sammy, and it was devastating to me when she left. It was around the time my daughter was in Utah at her therapeutic boarding school, and it was difficult with my daughter being gone and questioning myself and just a really sad time. And it just seemed like this duck arrived at this time to where I needed something else to focus on. And so our family became very close to Sammy. And at times she would fly away at night and then she'd come back in the morning. But then one weekend we left town and she flew away and didn't come back. That was so devastating. And I swore to myself and to my husband, because he had to put up with me crying, that I would never raise a duck again. So when my stepdaughter called me back in June, it was a few days before my daughter was graduating from her therapeutic boarding school and was going to be moving to Florida. She's told me she found this little duckling outside of her apartment and she thought of me immediately. And I couldn't bear the thought of it not having anywhere to go. So I said, bring that baby to me. But this time, with the experience that I had before with how heartbroken I was when the last duck left, I was really tempted this time to clip this duck's wings. And you clip a duck's wings when you have a pet duck or they're in an area where you want to keep them in the same area to keep them safe. At least we think we're keeping them safe. But I really wrestled with the idea of clipping her wings because it just felt safer. If she couldn't fly, then she couldn't leave. And then I don't have to panic and worry if she disappears for a couple of hours or even a couple of days, which she did do last week. I thought she was gone. It was the first time she had flown away. And I was heartbroken again, but not as bad. I knew this would probably be coming. And 48 hours, to my surprise, I come home and she's in the pool again. She came back. But it was still so scary and so upsetting. But I realized something that was deeper at play. I wasn't just trying to protect her. I was actually trying to control her out of my own fear. And then it really hit me because this feeling was familiar, that this was exactly what I've had to unlearn as a mother. Letting my daughter fly, letting her move to Florida after being in her boarding school, knowing that maybe it's too soon. Maybe this is just too much freedom right now. But I had to let her leave. You know, it's the hardest kind of love. It's the love that says, I trust you more than I fear losing you. And just like Gigi, my daughter needed to explore beyond the pool that we have for her here, all nice and safe at her home. She did come back on her own terms. Because when we release control, we make room for connection. We make room for connection to return genuinely, fully, freely. And after 2 months in Florida, we all realized that this is just too much. And my daughter really needs more structure right now. And that was okay. But I believe if I had tried to force it, instead of letting her figure it out on her own, I think there would have been a lot of resentment because the reality is I have been clipping my daughter's wings throughout her life. Whether when she was really little, going to gymnastics or soccer and feeling like just the sensory overload is too much, I would take her out. Or going to a school where the kids would either bully her or make fun of her. And she didn't even really know it for the most part when she was young, or just teachers that just didn't understand her. I took her to a different school. I was clipping her wings because those were all situations that she could have learned from. And I realized I was doing that for my own comfort and for my own security. Yes, I felt like I was protecting her, but in the end, she didn't learn valuable lessons that she needed to. And now that she has flown and come back and she's back in my home, our relationship is better than it ever has been because I finally gave her freedom to fly. I finally stopped clipping her wings, just as I desperately want to clip Gigi's wings. And what's really created out of that as well is me realizing that it's not just about clipping her wings. It made me actually think about and wonder how many times have I clipped my own with doubt, with fear, with perfectionism, with that little voice that's saying, "Who do you think you are?" I've limited myself more than circumstances ever has. I've stayed small. I've stayed safe. I have swam in the pool, the safe pool that I've created here, the familiar pool, because I was way too afraid to fly toward the unknown. But Gigi, she doesn't scare, she doesn't care if the sky is unfamiliar to her. She just goes. She doesn't ask for a map. She just goes. And I want more of that in my life because over time, I've created these self-limiting beliefs. And with Gigi here and seeing how whether I'm clipping her wings or not clipping my wings and realizing I've been clipping my own lately, I've realized as a nurse would, I need a dose adjustment because the more I sit in doubt and questioning and fear of the unknown, I don't move. I don't grow. And the scariest part is that I don't dream. When I was 21 years old, I dreamed of moving to LA. I was from a small town in Arkansas, 2,000 people. Everybody knew everybody. And perhaps I watched way too much MTV at the time, but I had this dream of moving to Los Angeles. I didn't feel like I was this small town girl. I just really was burning inside of me to move to LA. I'd never been on a plane before. I had never driven on a freeway before, one with 6 lanes. Those are interstates where I'm from, 2 lanes, and no stoplights in my town. And yet I had this burning desire to come to LA. And at the time, I didn't really know how I was going to do it. But after meeting some people and me finding a job and then me finding a place to live, I drove my little red Sunfire across the country to Los Angeles and landed here because I had a dream. And yes, was I afraid? I remember being somewhat fearful, but overall, I was excited. I had no idea what was in store for me. I had no idea long term financially how I was going to make it because it was so much more expensive out here. But it didn't matter. Those fears were just so diluted by my excitement and my passion and my drive. I want that girl back. Like, where did she go? Where is the girl that was unafraid to drive across the country by herself in this little car with $900 in her pocket, hoping it's all going to work out? Like, where is she? That is the type of flying I want to do again. No more clipping of my wings. And in me realizing that I've been clipping my own wings out of fear and doubt, I wouldn't underdose a patient. So why do I keep underdosing my own potential? Playing small is not therapeutic, and the only antidote is self-trust. So using my tuition, trusting myself when I feel those those dreams, those passions, and really going for it. That's something that watching Gigi has really opened my eyes to lately. And one of the other things that I feel I've been learning is that I can't turn a duck into a dog. And that may sound silly or funny, but there have been days where I caught myself getting frustrated with her on why aren't you acting more like a dog? Like come inside when I tell you to, when I call your name. Don't go to the bathroom in the house 'cause she walks in and out of the house freely. Or I wanting her to sleep inside because I want the comfort and I want to know that she's safe. But Gigi's a duck. She's not a dog. And no matter how much she plays with the dogs or goes and eats out of the dog's bowls and acts like one, at her core, she is wired to fly, to explore, to respond to a deeper instinct. And there's a lesson in that also. I can't keep trying to make people or even myself into something they're not just because it feels convenient or predictable, or even trying to change them into something else because it would be less painful for me. Especially with my daughter, when she was getting older and a teenager, she would come down in these outfits, and I would be like, what in the world is that? It is not Halloween. Why are we wearing that to school? And I really tried to really put her in this box with me where she dressed like me, she grew her hair out like me, or she wanted to do her nails with me. But I found the more I kept trying to influence her or change her in that way, especially when it came to her clothes, I realized the resentment was getting worse and worse. It's just this whole situation and watching this duck has really reminded me to let people be who they are and to remember who I am, even when I'm tempted to shrink or conform. People will always show you who they are. And reality is, I can't change that. And so, just like I wish Gigi acted more like a dog, her DNA says otherwise. We do try to mold people into what comforts us, but healing really only comes when we honor their design. And Gigi has helped me to try to stop resisting the nature of others, and in particular, myself, and listening more to myself and really being me. And then another lesson that I feel Gigi has really helped me learn is to just let things roll off my back. One of the sweetest metaphors that I've taken from her is let it roll off like water on feathers. Ducks have these feathers that are water resistant. Just the drops literally roll off of them, or else they would sink. And that's why these baby ducklings have to be taken out of the water because they can't jump out of the pool and they don't have these feathers yet that are water resistant and they will eventually drown and get tired. And their little feathers don't quite, they absorb water at that point. But ducks are made for the storm. They don't sit there in a storm and get soaked and shiver and not move. They shake it off and they keep going. And I believe I need more of that. I need more of that as a nurse when the day doesn't go as I had hoped with my patients, as a mother when my daughter is really challenging me or making bad decisions that I know are going to affect her. And even just as a woman and a wife, blending families, navigating our exes and co-parenting with our stepkids. And even as a daughter-in-law with in-laws that aren't quite as accepting of a daughter-in-law that you had hoped and was going to be the family that you dreamed of. I have several situations that I just feel I've really got to just shake this off, and including all the other invisible weight that I carry. Not everything deserves a reaction. I am learning that the hard way a lot of times. Not every opinion deserves a seat at the table. And I'm learning to protect my energy by letting things roll off of me and trusting what matters will stick. So I've called this an emotional triage. A triage, when you go to the ER, they're there to assess the situation and which patient is the one we need to make a priority and really act on. There are some things you can go into an ER and say, I hit my head, or, oh, I sliced my finger, it's bleeding. They'll probably put some cotton on it and tell you to wait in line. And then there are some things that you can say, like, I'm having chest pain and difficulty breathing, that will get you a frontline ticket straight back into a room. So, doing an emotional triage, really listening and thinking about what actually needs a reaction and what actually should I just let go. This has been specifically difficult for me lately, especially as I'm in perimenopause and going through all these hormonal changes to where it's a little bit harder to regulate my emotions. My poor husband has had to deal with that because I can be happy one day, sad one day, angry the next 5 minutes, and letting things just roll off of me, especially when it's not in my nature naturally, it's been challenging. And so I have really had to step back and take take an assessment of what is worthy of my time right now. What do I need to be focusing on? What things should I be like Gigi and just let it roll off of me? As a nurse, I know that not every alarm beeping in the hospital is a code. It's not something I need to go run to. So in life too, not everything deserves a full emotional resuscitation. And that is a very important lesson that I have been learning lately. And in doing that, in doing this emotional triage, Gigi has also helped me realize that I need to have better adaptability. Ducks are masters of water, land, and air. Gigi doesn't just fly, she walks on land, she swims, and she soars in the air. She adapts. So must I. Whether it's an unexpected surgery, the unpredictability of parenting a teenager, the tension of family dynamics, or just really waking up every day in a world that takes more than it gives, I want to remember that I too can adapt. When I have a patient that comes in and they are in a multi-system or multi-organ failure, that means like multiple organs at once are not working, which means the patient is not going to do well. And if I am not having a multi-system adaptability in my life, I am not going to do well. This summer, I had to do a lot of adapting. My daughter moved home, and although I love her being home, we're going to adapt, right? We haven't had a teen in our home for a couple years. Our other two kids are at college, and my daughter has been gone to boarding school and had moved. And so we're adapting to having a teen in our house now. And this summer, I went for a routine appointment to get my IUD removed because I was having some symptoms and took 5 minutes, was getting ready to go, and did a quick ultrasound just to make sure things were fine. And my doctor saw a large mass on my ovary. That was not in the plans for my July. July is my birthday month. It's probably my favorite month of the year outside of December for Christmas. And within 2 weeks, I was in surgery, getting my ovary and my fallopian tube removed. And thank God the pathology came out clean, but it was a scary time. It definitely was not in my summer forecast of plans. And I had to adapt. I had to figure out, it really put things into perspective because I am not used to being the patient. I am used to being the nurse. I am used to being taking care of people. And there I found myself with doctors that I see every day taking care of me, or nurses that I work with all the time taking care of me. And there was a vulnerability to that of letting people take care of me and adapting into that role of a patient and allowing that process and being, a patient in a hospital that I've been working at for 16 years. And not to mention just the adapting of losing part of my womanhood and my body and the hormonal changes that go along with that. There's been a lot of adapting that I've needed to do that I wasn't quite ready for. And I guess that's the beauty of adapting. You're not exactly ready for it, but you've got to go and do those things as needed. And as Gigi thrives on land and water and air, it reminds me that I can adapt in any condition. And whether it's stress or surgery recovery or an emotional upheaval that I'm having, I need to be like her, calm above water, paddling quietly beneath, but always moving forward. And then this takes me to perhaps the most important lesson that I have learned from our Gigi. And that is the double-edged sword of, or double-edged scalpel of nurturing. And as a nurse, as a mom, I am a nurturer deep within my bones, deep in me. That's what's stimulated me to want to be a nurse and to be a mom, and somehow taking in all of these animals like a duck and these dogs. I just really, really am a nurturer. And I've learned to understand that my softness isn't a weakness and that my nurturing, and yes, even for animals, it's not a flaw. It's actually part of what makes me human. It's a gift and yet it also brings a lot of grief. But I also need to remember that I'm not just here to care for life, but I'm here to live it as well. And I care for a lot of people in my life. I care for my patients. I care for my husband. I care for my daughter and my stepkids and my animals and my mom. But who cares for me? Just like in healthcare, there's a risk of compassion fatigue. And my little Gigi duck reminds me to give without depletion, to offer care, but also to conserve it. I see her floating in the pool a lot, and she turns her little neck, sticks her beak into her feathers, and she has a little place in our pool that she will hide out in. It's our little gutter, and it shields her from the sun when it's too hot. It also shields her from these two hawks that swarm our pool in our area often. And sometimes it's just her in there, just seems to be taking a break and resting. And I feel that I need to do that more often. Just kind of turn my head and go take a rest. She knows when to take care of herself and to take some distance away from everybody, including me, because I'm always out there calling for her. And some of this for me is who I decide to spend my time with. Because sometimes I get sucked into wanting to be friends with a lot of people, and then I want to nurture them and take care of them, or what can I do to help, and really can get depleted. And it especially can get depleted when you are surrounding yourself by energy vampires or family members who are just not, loving you the way that you wish that they would. I've really gotten to where I determine not only who I spend my time with, but who I allow to have access to me, who has the privilege of spending time with me. I don't need energy vampires in my life 24/7. I need more of life-giving friendships, friends that are my spiritual defibrillators. They bring my heart back to life. They stabilize me, not people who constantly try to wound or even don't even realize they're wounding, but they have no desire to change it. I really spend a lot of time with my dogs and my animals. And I find as I've gotten older, my circle of friends have gotten smaller, but it's been more quality. And just as Gigi protects herself, I protect myself. I protect my energy. I protect the energy in my home and who comes into it. I protect my child and my husband and our family from outside influences that are going to negatively impact us. So while I am definitely a nurturer at heart, it can be a blessing and a curse because sometimes you can just care too much. And the older I get, yes, the less I care overall about how people think of me, but I also do still truly care and love people. I think sometimes I love and I'm loyal to a fault, but that's not always good because I need to rest. I need to not always give my energy. And as I watch this carefree duck floating in my pool, watching her dive down deep in the water when she's feeling threatened or playing, or swimming around and sticking her nose in her feathers and hiding out just to protect herself, or coming in and when the dogs are eating and she wants to come eat and she hears my voice. I feel like there are so many lessons I've learned. And just yesterday, Gigi flew away again. And it did cross my mind again that, gosh, I wish I would have clipped her wings, because wondering if she's going to come back is so hard, and looking out every day into the pool to see if she's there. But what she's taught me in the last couple months, I can't do that. I can't clip her wings. As comfortable as she is here, she still flew away because it is in her DNA. It is who she is. She is meant to explore and not stay in this one place. So, if I hear Gigi in the pool, or if I see a feather that she's left behind again, I'm going to smile and remember that some lessons don't come from books. They come from creatures who waddle into our hearts, and they fly away when they must, and they return just to remind us who we are. And so today's prescription from your favorite nurse, your prescription from me, is to let her fly. Let yourself fly. And trust that what is meant for you will always know its way home. Don't clip your own wings. Don't sell yourself too short and underdose your own potential. Let yourself fly.